Bathroom break time is up. It gives me great pleasure to welcome back, first of all, to lead this panel, Annette Insdorf, as I mentioned before. Filmstruck is her series that's currently streaming. Look it up, Filmstruck with Annette Insdorf. And Annette, I'll hand things over to you so you can welcome our two guests here. Thank you very much.
Gladly. It's an honor because I consider this one of the more powerful motion pictures that I've seen lately for reasons that are both aesthetic. It's just a sort of magnificent motion picture in its cinematic storytelling, and for its content, for the questions that it raises about both the past and the present. I'm very proud to share the stage with, to my far right, the writer Gábor T. Szántó, and to my immediate... and to my immediate right, the director, Ferenc Török. We had the opportunity to talk about this film at the Jerusalem Film Festival, where I was present at the premiere, and I've been thinking about the film a little bit ever since. So my first question, and then of course we're going to open it up to the audience. I know that this is adapted from a short story that Gábor wrote. It was called Homecoming, with other short stories. There is a literary verbal origin. But now, watching again towards the end of the film, I'm struck by the cinematic storytelling, the way, for example, that it uses the elements. This is a film that really makes you aware of the earth, especially parched, summer-scorched earth and air. And then at the end, the fire followed by the rain, the water that seems to have a cleansing effect. Could you two talk a little bit about how you went from something that was essentially verbal to something that is so visual and elemental? How did that come about?
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation. So it's not an easy question. So the smoke and the water and together is finger of God, really. So the smoke was in the short story, and but the rain not. The rain is arrived, and we have no possibility to escape. So.
You see, this is an example of why a film professor like myself should not always be trusted, because I'm ready to project onto the artistic intentions, oh, the cleansing rain. It happened to rain.
Yeah, the filmmaking sometimes is improvisation, so we get a bad weather schedule. So, and we have only 3 days to shooting the beginning and the end scene because the train station is really expensive because the old train moved from Budapest 200 kilometers there, and it's really expensive in old train. One old train we have in Hungary, and and so now we thinking about not with the script writer, not with my first AD, my assistant. What is the possibility in the schedule? And we recognize, of course, impossible the rain in the beginning because it's a sunny, hot summer noon. So that's why we use the timing. But after, when we recognize the weather will be rainy, we get some rain machine plus. So it's not just waiting for God or something. So it's not easy.
The limitations define the possibilities in everything, including filmmaking. Now, Gábor, Ferenc just mentioned that your story already had the smoke. And I'm wondering, because the last shot is so evocative, the camera going as the dark smoke wafts over the landscape, I think kind of suggesting the smoke from the crematoria, perhaps? I mean, again, I always worry that I'm projecting onto movies. But Gábor, when you wrote the story, was the smoke for you supposed to be evoking that past?
Good evening, everybody. It's this occasion verse for a Sheheheyanu. So that to tell the truth, the smoke wasn't in the story. The problem is that we had approximately 13 versions of the screenplay, and even myself, I absolutely don't remember details because I absolutely mix the original short story and the versions of the screenplay. But the smoke was very important part of the screenplay, became very important element, and it was very important at several moments in the film. If you remember when the clerk pushed the cigar and he realized he got something from the smoke, and we see the face of him. He knows at that moment the facts of the crematorium. So he got something that his former friend Polak's fate has some connection to the smoke. And of course, at the end, there is the smoke. And it was, as I heard at the end of the shooting, that smoke scene was in a way the great moment of the Elemi Ragai, who was the cameraman, and it was in a way it was also an improvisation, but he absolutely felt that moment. He caught the moment, and it became a very strong effect of the film.
Yeah, we shoot only one times because it was too far from the camera. It's maybe 300 meters because the train lived, and LMAR improvisation moments was the movement and the whole ending shot. So yeah, it's only one time.
And this is one of the great cinematographers, Ragali. He had, among his films that he shot, the Simon Wiesenthal story, Murderers Among Us, and the remake of Jacob the Liar that had Robin Williams and Armin Mueller-Stahl, and the very choice of black and white. I mean, that's what renders the film's poetry, the palette of gray and black and white and smoke, so powerful. In America, it's kind of hard to shoot black and white films, at least in Hollywood, because studio executives demand color. Did you have any more of a difficult time getting the film made because of the insistence on black and white, or would it have been the same?
No, I think the black and white is not dead when the color technology burst. So I think now it's a renaissance again in the cell phones and Instagram. Our kids use the black and white, and the Nike commercials or so is. But of course, we not use black and white because it's a fashion or something. When I read the story, I watched in black and white. So maybe the collective memorial about that time in black and white, because the archive photos, the news, the movie news was in black and white. But also is much more concentrate for a drama, for much more simple, much more straight. And when we start this long story with this script and this shooting, we want to straight and simple things. So we feel it's a powerful, basic story, and if we thinking too much and we want to show too complicated, is maybe less.
And I think one of the great virtues of the film we have just seen, not unlike the film Ida from Poland a few years ago that won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, is the choice of a very restricted palette. In other words, black and white, and the unity of time and space in this film. I mean, after all, we just watched a movie that takes place in less than one day. I mean, essentially 4 hours. And how much do these filmmakers managed to suggest beyond those 4 hours, I mean, the movement back, it's okay, back in time into the past, which casts its looming shadow over the present. I don't know, maybe this is a foolish question, but since Ida came to mind, is this a film that you watched while you were
Yeah.
preparing this?
Yeah, we've been in the premieres together in Hungary, and I know Pavel Pawlikowski before. And when I watched Ida, it was 2 or 3 years before the shooting. I feel we are on the right way. So, and after Son of Shaul, so it's a new generation and a new point of view about the Second World War and the Holocaust, and Ida also really important because it's a post-trauma drama like ours. So it's absolutely different movie because it's from the 50s, and yeah, but the elements and the topic and the age of the director and the I think it's really similar and really important. The Polish and Hungarian parallelity. It's a post-communist country, and we have no. We started to work the post traumas together. So maybe Gábor will continue.
And especially, Gábor, because you wrote the story essentially many years ago, and you are yourself a member of the third generation, as we say.
Well, I'm second generation. My
Second.
parents were kids when they were deported with my grandmothers to Austrian camps, and there were stories in the family on those who lost in Auschwitz and other most horrible places. But Austria was a place where the Jews mostly survived. Part of the Jews survived. That's how I can be here. I always focused on the post-Holocaust stories of Jews and local citizens, and I felt it is a most important topics because I felt in my earlier period that nobody wrote about these stories. Everybody wrote about the Holocaust, and I didn't feel it enough. I felt, well, there are survivors. There are approximately 100,000 Jews in Hungary. They had life after the war, after the Holocaust. The homecoming, it's a very dramatic story. The Jewish situation under the communist period, it's very important and very interesting because the Jews participated in a way in the communist regime, and they were also underdogs in the communist regime. If they were religious, if they were Zionist, they had sufferings under the communist time. And I used these historical material for creating novels and short stories. And I also focused on the so-called Jewish revival after the 89 political changing, which partly revival, partly difficult judo with the Jewish identity because several people want to forget it. Several people want to throw it in under the carpet and forget it. And I had my personal experiences with my writings with Hungarian editors with Jewish origin who didn't like to publish it, and they opposed to publish it because they felt it is some kind of attack on the assimilation. It is attack against the silence, and they didn't want to break the silence. So in the 90s and then in the beginning of the 2000, it was quite difficult to publish stories like this.
But if I think about the meaning of this film, and it's not so different from the end of Ida, it may be too late for István and that generation who carry so much guilt, but it's their children. Arpad has to get out of town. He has to leave on the same train as the Jewish men. And in Ida also, there's a sense, I mean, there it's exhuming corpses, but that there has to be something that enables at least the next generation to go forward, whether it's the children of survivors, whether it is, or the children of the dead, or the children of the indifferent profiteers, that there needs to be some reckoning. And this film is all about the day of reckoning. And it's about, I think, and by the way, I'm talking too much. We're going to take questions from the audience in just a second.
No,
Yes.
please.
Would you
are
agree?
clever.
No, I mean, I always have a lot of questions and comments. It goes with the territory of teaching. But would you say that betrayal is a central theme here? Because at the beginning, the fiancé, Arpad's fiancé's betrayal of her betrothed is a fraction representing the entire town's betrayal of their Jewish neighbors. I mean, was that, Gabor, for you first and then for you, Ferenc, was that an animating theme?
Well, the betrayal is a key element of the stories, and of course the whole Holocaust issue, because the majority of the society betrayed the minority, the Jews, the state, the leaders of the state betrayed the Jews as citizens, as local citizens. So it's absolutely part of the story. But this personal betrayal, it's another level of the story, and we mostly use this element with the fiancé and the homecoming of his former lover, and especially this young lady as something that is not part of the main story, but somehow connected to it. And as she wants to destroy the druggery, perfumery shop, she unconsciously put something that destroyed the history itself. You've seen the burning of the photo album. The photo album that appeared only once before that moment when Arpad opened it for a very short time. I wanted to have that scene a bit longer to audience to realize who are on that photo. That on the photo, his father and the Polak, the owner of the shop, who were friends. At the end of the film, you saw this photo album is burning, which means that this young lady did something that helped the process of forgetting. So the memories of the dead are also disappear.
There is a microphone, and there are some questions.
I enjoyed the movie. It was outstanding. It reminded me a little bit of Shop on Main Street to see local populations, but I thought you seemed to be a little more, it seemed more honest. There were good people, there were bad people, but I'm very much moved to want to read the story after listening to you tonight. I have two quick questions. One is, there seemed to be some tension with the local community and the two Jews. In one of the 13 versions, was there violence between the two? I'm just curious in terms of the way it was developed. The other thing is, which I think adds to the, I don't know, sophistication, or what makes the movie even more interesting, is the presence 1945 of the Russians and that whole issue. Oh, I know. The other question I really wanted to ask is there a market in,
We will forget the first.
Is there a market in Hungary for these movies?
So there was no physical aggression against the Jews in any of the versions because we felt that it would be too much. We want to show more or less the average situation. There were approximately, I've seen on the internet an essay that shows that there were approximately 20 demonstration, aggression against Jews in Hungary right after the Holocaust when they came back. But it was comparing to the whole country situation exceptional. So we didn't want it. We felt it enough that the people who go to the cemetery make a situation that the aggression can be happened.
Yeah, so it's a decision in the beginning. So we know real stories, aggressivity, quite close to pogroms, and the Hungarian police didn't help, and so we want to show the feeling or the atmosphere of and the possibility of the pogrom, but we don't want to make a bloody drama in the end, because the idea of the basic script is a misunderstanding. There is a so the village people afraid from them scenes or guilt, and not for the didn't understand the real situation. So I think this is the basic idea. Is not a yeah, you understand. So something else
Is there a market in Hungary for this kind of film?
the market.
No, is this kind of film commercially viable in Hungary? Are Hungarian audiences interested in this kind of story?
Yeah, we have quite good audience. Yeah, close to 40,000. It's good for this, and really successful in outside from Hungary. So that's why we release in the US. We're really proud, and in France and in Benelux, and also in television in Hungary. Now we will continue. So yeah, the people curious about them. So.
I found particularly striking that you had a priest. He didn't have to be in the movie. You're suggesting the priest as complicit in what happened. How, and I imagine the Catholic Church is still pretty important in Hungary. How is that viewed by your local compatriots?
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, I
really
was
important.
quite
It's really
shocked
important.
that you had the priest there.
The church was part of the game. The
Yeah,
church was compatriots in
it's
several cases with the state.
it's one of the hardest statement of this movie. I think the Catholic church was in the mafia. So the police, the politicians, and the church. Yeah, this is a triangle, and it's really important that this deep and hard statement. I know, because of course we show a different kind of Christian or Catholic people relations for this topic. In this story also we want to show a quite positive character, the old woman with this story with the kids. So we comparing not only black and white. So
The Catholic Church played a very ambivalent role in Hungary, and the churches, Christian churches, played a very ambivalent role in the time of the anti-Jewish laws, anti-Jewish acts, and in the time of the Holocaust. But when they tried to help Jews, it was mostly in Budapest, in the capital of Hungary, when they can hide, where they can baptize in a very quick way in 1944 before the deportation. But in villages, the situation was much more different. It was a very tiny community, this film, and in several
really feudalistic.
Really feudalistic. So the priest and the clerk and the local police was in one camp.
You're at the JCC, so we're protected from lightning right now. So take it out of the church. We have a question right here.
I have a question. What was the exact location of the shooting?
So we built up the main square around. Of course, it doesn't exist 70 years ago. So the electricity and roads. So, but we several villages we shoot. West part of Hungary, east part, but build up a lot of the store, the main square, the cemeteries. So we built up. But of course, we located the movie a, a real village close to the Soviet or Ukrainian border in Hungary, close to Tokaj. So that's the wine region. It's a really important because so we search and looking for archives and what is a typical village for that. But it's really important because it was a rich area, so it's a rich village, and there was no fight, no really kill each other, no Russian army, and so it's not, and no Germans, so, and we located to this northeast of Hungary, and really important, 500,000 Jewish Hungarian people died, and mostly from countryside, and mostly religious people. So that's also an important, we show religious Jews. So it's a new topic. It's not really examples before.
It was
We have
even
a question
more
on-
provocative for the assimilated Jewish editors.
We have a question all the way on the top.
Hi, I hope I'm saying this right, but Köszönöm szépen. Thank you so much. I found the film extraordinary. One thing that really resonated with me is how you had these two religious figures who really said nothing throughout the film. They had really no lines, and yet they were so critical to everything else that was going on around them, how they brought out the guilt, and everyone was like twisted because of their presence, even though they said nothing, which just speaks to the level of guilt that the village people really had over what they did to their, their fellow village people, during the war. So I thank you very much. It was really a very, very amazing film.
Thank you.
Just briefly, I really appreciated the way you presented the panic of the woman that they will have to return everything, or they suddenly try to book. And I remember that I am from a small village in Hungary, and I remember the return, and you demonstrated it very well. And as I said, very briefly, you showed when they were afraid that they have to return everything. It was very well done. Thank you.
Whose idea was it to play the Kol Nidre music?
The composer of the film, Tibor Szemző, search archive music for it, and we use a lot of in the radio and of course in the film music, and we decided the Kol Nidre is it's a wedding day, and it's a so it's much more sensitive and emotional, and we. So it was the best, and we when we show first time, and after we can change it because it was much powerful, and it's a real archive Kol Nidre from the 20s. Is a gypsy violinist, Jan Chitol. We got it's a real secret.
We're going to take one last question here.
You showed the little baby's or little child's shoes in the grave. And then there is a scene later when the local children are playing soccer or football, okay? And then there's a glimpse to a pair of shoes. Is there any connection between the two? In our eyes, for sure, there is.
So we use iconic pictures or iconic elements in the story. Of course, the train, the smoke, and the children's shoes. The children's shoes became in Hungary as a symbol of the Holocaust because Gyula Power made a sculpture next to the Danube in Budapest. And so it's, you understand.
The children's shoes was Ferry's invention because in the original story they buried soaps. It was a very frequent thing after the Shoah that Orthodox Jews buried soap in East Europe because they believed at that time that the Nazis made soap from the dead's bodies. But later it came out that it was a false information made by the British Secret Service to make the Nazis' sins even bigger. So I used a footnote under my short story to tell this fact, but Ferenc felt it wouldn't be good to put at the end of the film some kind of footnote, and to use children's shoes are much more emotional. So for a film, it's much more better than the soap.
And personal, so yeah.
I know there's a lot more to ask and a lot more to discuss, and you'll have an opportunity to do that upstairs at the reception. Let's have a round of applause, please, for all of our participants here tonight. Most importantly, it opens November 1st, and you should be telling all your friends. I want to give a big thank you to Annette Insdorf, of course, to Ferenc and Gábor. Thank you both so much for being here. And of course, to the Hungarian Cultural Center for their support. The reception is upstairs in the lobby. Please join us there and have a good night. We look forward to seeing you at other screenings.